So, picture this. You've got a problem, but it's not just any problem. It's something huge, like a pandemic or climate change, something that no single country can fix on its own. What do? Well, the world's go-to move for centuries has been to get everyone together in one room for a big international conference.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When a crisis doesn't care about borders, how on earth do you even begin to tackle it as a planet?
The simplest answer, the one that makes the most sense right off the bat, is just that. You get the right people in a room to talk it out. That's the very heart of what we call multilateral diplomacy.
But yeah, you knew there was a but coming. If it were that easy, we'd have solved most of these problems by now. See, getting in the room is just step one. The real trick is figuring out what happens next, thanks to a whole mess of complex rules and power plays.
To really understand how these meetings work today, we've got to take a quick trip back in time. People have been meeting to solve problems forever, but the kind of structured, global get-togethers we have now, they have a pretty specific backstory.
This whole thing really evolved over time. It kicked off way back in the 17th century with these huge, important congresses that were all about ending massive wars. Then, the 19th century rolls around and we get a new kind of meeting, the conference, which was more about tackling shared technical problems. And then, after the World Wars, everything changed again with the creation of permanent bodies like the UN.
And this right here is a perfect example of that 19th century pivot. Suddenly, you have steamships and trains making the world feel smaller, which is great, but it also meant diseases could travel way faster. So, countries created the International Sanitary Conferences to deal with that very specific, very practical issue. And that work, believe it or not, eventually led to the World Health Organization we have today.
Okay, so you've managed to get everyone to show up? Fantastic. Now what? Well, this is where the rules of the game take over. And these procedures, these rules for how you talk and how you decide, they can literally make or break the entire effort. And right out of the gate, you hit a massive roadblock. Who even gets to be in the room? Who gets a voice? Who gets a vote? And, just as important, who gets left out in the cold?
The old way of doing things was pretty simple. You only invited the countries that were directly involved. But that's really started to change. There's this growing realization that governments can't fix everything by themselves. So now we're seeing this shift to what's called multi-stakeholder diplomacy, where you invite NGOs, corporations, and community groups to have a say too. And if you want to see just how intense this fight over who gets a seat can be, look no further than the UN Security Council. The most powerful members were locked in right after World War II. A lot of people argue that it just doesn't reflect what the world looks like anymore. But trying to change it, well, that's a whole other political battlefield.
Yeah, trying to reform these powerful institutions is slow going. So slow, in fact, that one diplomat said the pace of change was glacial. That tells you everything you need to know about how hard it is to change the guest list once it's been set.
All right, so let's say you finally figured out who's in the room. Now for the next hurdle, and it is a big one. When you have hundreds of competing interests all under one roof, how do you actually get them all to agree on anything?
Well, at first, the UN tried the obvious democratic route. One state, one vote. Simple, right? But then, in the 1960s, a ton of newly independent, smaller countries joined. And suddenly, the big, powerful nations that founded the UN kept getting outvoted. This created a huge problem and forced everyone to find a new way to make decisions. They needed something different. They needed consensus.
And here's the bottom line. The whole system had to shift to avoid what one expert called the danger of powerful alienated minorities. I mean, think about it. If the countries paying most of the bills feel like they're always losing the vote, they might just pick up their ball and go home, right? And then the whole thing falls apart. So that's how we ended up with consensus. It's a really interesting idea. The goal isn't to get everyone to love a decision, but to get to a point where nobody absolutely hates it. There's no formal vote. The chairperson just puts a proposal out there, and if no one objects, literally, if the room is silent, it's considered passed. Silence means you agree.
So all these changes in the rules of the game, they've really opened the door for a completely new breed of organization to step onto the world stage, one that's designed from the ground up to bring all sorts of different players together.
And this is that trend we were talking about, a bit more formally defined, multi-stakeholder diplomacy. It's all about building these custom alliances that bring together governments, sure, but also big companies, private foundations, and nonprofits, all teaming up to solve one specific problem.
And if you want to see this in action, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, is the perfect example.
It was started back in 2000, thanks to a huge chunk of money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and its mission is crystal clear: get life-saving vaccines to kids in the world's poorest countries.
Now, look at who actually runs this thing. It's fascinating. It's not just a bunch of countries. You've got the countries using the vaccines having the same power as the countries donating the money. Then you've got the vaccine industry at the table, civil society groups, big players like UNICEF and the WHO, plus a whole bunch of independent experts. Power here is deliberately shared.
So after all that, where are we now? Well, we're basically living in a world with two different playbooks for solving global problems running at the same time. You've got the old-school government-led system and these new, nimble alliances. And, they each have their pros and cons.
Take global health, for instance. On one side, you have the World Health Organization. It's essential for global coordination, for leadership. But man, can it be slow and tangled in red tape. On the other side, you've got alliances like Gavi. They're fast, they're focused, they've got money. But that can lead to a messy landscape where efforts overlap, and you start to wonder, who are these powerful new groups really accountable to?
And that leads us to the big, final question. As the world's problems get more complex, more urgent, who do we trust to take the lead? Do we put our faith in the steady, established institutions that represent everyone? Or do we bet on these new, fast-moving alliances that are shaking things up? The truth is, the answer's probably a mix of both. And figuring out that perfect balance, well, that's the next great diplomatic challenge.